I've never been one to believe in the supernatural, but what happened to me and my girlfriend on that road trip? Something changed. It's taken me a while to gather the courage to write this, and even now, I can feel its eyes on me sometimes as I type. I've only been able to get a paragraph or two before I stop, but someone has to know. I've always despised long car trips. This fact wasn't lost on me when my girlfriend at the time, with the help of her parents, took it upon herself to fund a trip overseas to the USA, our own Great Western Trail. She conveniently forgot that she didn't have the license, leaving me as the sole driver. I grumbled, but a lot of money had been spent and given to us to do with as we pleased. I wasn't going to spoil this, as it was our reward for successfully graduating from a university. The trip wasn't particularly memorable. When I think back on it, I struggle to recall most of the places we stayed. I remember landing in New York, spending a few days seeing the popular sights, and then renting a car and just driving. We had no real plan. With plenty of money, we could stay wherever we wanted. We had a few destinations in mind, but most of my checklist was on the West Coast. San Francisco and Vegas were still ahead, so driving was inevitable. We'd pick a highway or back road and drive until I needed a break. Even though I found it tedious, Megan's company was comforting, though the ride would grow silent when she slept. The monotony of towering trees, sprawling plains, and endless fields played tricks on my mind. The persistent rumble of the wheels and the silent, stagnant air, punctuated only by the hum of the engine, added to the oppressive sameness. This was the aspect of driving that I loathed. Only the occasionally passing streetlight signs provided any change, offering glimpses of nearby towns or warnings of local wildlife. After 8 hours of uninterrupted driving one day, I hadn't encountered a single town or city. Normally, I'd pass through 3 or 4 in a day's journey, but this time, the landscape remained stubbornly unpopulated. Yawning through my third can of Red Bull, I considered pulling over in the middle of nowhere to catch some sleep. Then, just as the fuel alarm blinked to life, a weathered sign appeared, almost too late, marking the turnoff to a town. There was a subtle unease as I veered onto the exit. It struck me as odd that I could not recall any prior signs. Yet, the promise of fuel and a potential resting place outweighed my apprehension. The indicator ticking, the steering wheel turning, and Megan staring beside me. I guided the car towards a place named Grace Hall. As the sun began its descent beyond the horizon, casting long shadows across the empty fuel station, Megan and I pulled in, grateful for a chance to stretch our legs. The flickering fluorescent lights above hummed intermittently, adding to the eerie atmosphere of the isolated place. "We'll fill up here," I said, cutting the engine. Megan nodded, glancing around at the quiet surroundings. "And where is here?" she muttered. "A possible place to sleep?" I stepped out of the car onto the cool evening air, the scent of petrol and dust lingering. The station was deserted except for a lone figure behind the counter, engrossed in a magazine. "A possible place to sleep?" I pushed open the creaking door and entered, a small bell chiming softly. The service worker looked up, a slight smile spreading across his young face as he greeted me with a nod. "Evening," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the empty convenience store. The worker stared at me, his smile showing teeth slightly. "Just gas today?" he said, a slight jubilation in his voice. "Yeah, thanks." I replied absentmindedly, pulling out some cash. Cash all good? Of course. His reply was almost a little too enthusiastic, lingering on the ah. I handed him the cash and took my change. His smile widened. Have a great day, sir. Yeah, thanks, I replied, turning away. Have a great day, sir. I paused, turned, and looked at the man again. His smile remained, showing all his teeth. The gnawing part was that he seemed unhappy. Not the soul-crushing surface kind of unhappy, but there was something in his eyes. I couldn't quite describe it. Have a great day, sir. He punctuated each word, eyes locked on mine. I will, thank you. With a ring of the bell, I walked out the door, still feeling his gaze on me. His smile never wavered. As I fueled the car, I glanced back into the store. He was staring at me. I couldn't tell if he was laughing or crying behind his gritted teeth, but that damn smile remained burnt into my mind. Getting back in the car, I shook myself. I was more than a little on edge. You okay, babe? Megan asked. I started up the car before pulling away. That was a chilling experience, I said with a forced laugh that even I didn't believe. How so? That guy was just creepy. No wonder he's out here at the station. There was a pause. Sure, Megan replied. Leaving the gas station behind, we ventured deeper into Gracehall, a town seemingly caught in a perpetual state of half-hearted development. Quaint shops with faded facades lined the main street, their windows showcasing dusty displays of antiques and local crafts. A solitary traffic light flickered intermittently, casting an unsettling glow over cracked sidewalks and neglected flower beds. "For road less traveled," Megan remarked, peering out of the window. "This truly is the explorer's way." Yeah, a strange vibe, I agreed, my thoughts still lingering on the encounter with the service worker. As we drove further, we passed a weathered sign promising accommodations ahead. Following its directions, we found ourselves at a modest motel inside town. The car park was empty except for a few cars, their owners unseen in the fading light of dusk. "I guess this will do for the night," I said, pulling into the parking space. Stepping out of the car, we were met with curious glances from the sparse population, their greeting smiles short but their stares lingered a little too long. The motel seemed to stand in silent anticipation, its neon sign buzzing faintly against the growing darkness. I leaned in close and whispered to Megan, "What's with all the looks?" She glanced at me, brushing off my concern. "It's a small town," she replied in a normal tone. "We're tourists in a backwater town. Of course we're going to get looks." After locking the car doors, we walked towards the somewhat inviting light of the lobby. Just as I approached the door with Megan in the lead, I paused and glanced over my shoulder. There was a whisper on the wind, a fleeting sound or thought. The caffeine was wearing off, and with a violent shake of my head, I dismissed it and entered the cramped lobby. "Hello there, dears." The wizened caretaker woman creaked, her smile forming like cracks on old porcelain. "A room for the two of you?" Megan smiled back brightly. "Yeah, just for the night, please. One double bed." The woman nodded in acceptance and wrote down our details in a dusty ledger. As I glanced at the ledger, it seemed unusually sparse, lacking additional names or reservations. "A couple's room. Names, please?" "I'm Megan, and this is Michael."
Megan and Michael, I do like the letter M.
A chuckle rattled through her, revealing teeth that seemed too white against Weather's skin. Megan shifted slightly, her gaze wandering around the lobby with a casual interest.
And where are you off to?
Megan stepped closer to respond, but I cut him with my question. We're just travelers. How much for the room? Her grin widened.
$40 for the room.
She offered the key to us, seemingly pulling it from thin air.
Thank you,
I said, taking it cautiously. Leaning against the counter, I counted out the notes before passing the key to Megan. Is there a place to eat around here? I asked, handing over the money.
Eat?
She seemed surprised.
Best not to linger when it gets dark. There's a vending machine with snacks. I'm sure you'll be okay.
I glanced outside. Darkness had fallen swiftly, cloaking the town in like a shroud.
Okay,
I nodded.
Do many people come this way?
I asked, thinking back on the ledger. The caretaker paused before she took the money, her smile widening slightly.
They come when they are needed.
She took the money.
Have a great day, sir.
Sure. I turned to step away, but her grip suddenly tightened on my wrist, making me look back. Her eyes pleaded, and her teeth gleamed brightly as her smile stretched her wrinkled skin. I stood there in confusion as her grip tightened.
Have a great day, sir.
I was shocked by her sudden strength and didn't move. Megan intervened smoothly.
Good night, ma'am.
Her tone was breezy. The grip released as suddenly as it had tightened. Megan was next to me with a cheerful expression. I checked my wrist and looked back at the caretaker. Her smile was still wide, but her mouth was closed. What just happened? Nodding awkwardly, I hurriedly left, my instincts telling me to keep her in sight, to not turn my back. Only when we opened and closed the lobby door did I dare to relax.
She seems nice,
Megan remarked, glancing back at the lobby with a dismissive shrug. I held it close to Megan as we approached our vehicle. Didn't she seem a bit odd to you? I asked. She grabbed me, Meg, like full-on Crypt Keeper clutched my wrist, I said with a touch of annoyance.
I wouldn't call that a grab. I think she just touched your hand in a friendly way.
She laughed as she pulled her suitcase out.
Probably thought you were flirting or something.
I wasn't.
Relax, Mike. Older folks can be like that.
I wanted to press the issue further, but Megan brushed me off again. Was it just me? Glancing back, I saw the caretaker woman in the distance, appearing to close up shop. She gave us a glance and a smile before hastily dropping the shutters. Shaking off the odd feeling, I turned back to find Megan making her way obliviously to the door. I took my bag and followed dutifully. She slid the key into the lock and opened the door effortlessly. Surprisingly, the room appeared to have been recently renovated. There was a modest TV and a large double bed. The calming blue interior was a stark contrast to the worn exterior of the motel. Megan responded with a jump, flopping onto the bed.
Not bad for $40.
I smiled at her enthusiasm.
Hungry?
Not really. Didn't she mention something about a vending machine? She dug her phone charger out of her bag. I guess all the local eateries close early due to the small population. That's how I interpreted her warning. I added uncertainly. Maybe there's a high crime rate? You think there'd be lots of criminals in a place this small? The sound of her phone accepting charge punctuated her question. I don't know. Why else would she warn us about going out? Megan shrugged.
Maybe she's just cautious.
I nodded mainly to myself and started towards the bathroom. This place better have running hot water. The shower was a stark contrast to the room. Perhaps I ran out of budget before getting the towels and the plumbing. At least the light worked, and more importantly, the hot water. I let it steam up before indulging in the warm embrace. My mind wandered, as shower thoughts tend to encourage, lingering on today's drive. I struggled to remember any major landmarks or anything of note. There was nothing. I kept pressing on the thought, all notions of washing myself forgotten. Beneath the roar of the running water, there was another sound. A buzzing, a whisper, a constant tone. I couldn't recall ever hearing it before. As the water began to go cold, a memory resurfaced. I did pass signs on the road, all pointing to Gracehall. It made sense, but for 8 hours? The buzz grew louder as I pushed further in my mind. The distance on the signs to Gracehall was always the same. It was always the next exit. A loud knock on the bathroom door startled me. "You good?" Megan asked. A shock of cold shivered me awake. I was freezing. "Yeah, I'm good. Be out in a moment." The sudden silence of the room was deafening. I strained to hear the buzz, but there was nothing. I made my way to the mirror, broke open my toiletry bag and began to brush my teeth. I kept my eyes down towards the sink, focusing on the routine. A nagging feeling in my gut made me hesitate to look up, so I kept my head firmly angled down. With clean teeth, I spat out the toothpaste and looked up out of habit. My reflection stared back at me, but there was something else. I couldn't see it. Behind me were just broken white tiles, but something was there. Dread crept through me as I remained still, locked in a staring contest with my own reflection. I dared not move. The buzzing returned, a presence gripping my very being. It was as if I stood on the edge of a cliff, knowing full well that stepping off would be fatal. I knew that if I glanced slightly to the left of my shoulder, my life would be over. Time passed. I don't know how long, before I closed my eyes. The feeling slowly dissipated, and I stepped away from the sink and out the bathroom door into the bedroom. My breath was heavy, buried deep in my stomach. Every movement felt like dragging boulders. Only when I opened my eyes and saw Megan lying casually on the bed with her phone did I let out a shudder of relief. "You were in there a while," she remarked, not looking up. "You'd better get some sleep." "I think so." I made my way to the edge of the bed and climbed in, my neck stiff and taut. I couldn't even glance behind me. Something was there, and I knew it meant the end. Laying on my back, I turned my head towards Megan, a protest forming on my lips. It got stuck in my throat as the oppressive blanket of dread fell over me, digging into my back and spine. I stopped myself as my stomach dropped again, the pits of my being filled with hollow trepidation. The words were stuck in my throat. I wanted to say it, to desperately convey that something was wrong, but terror engulfed me. "What's that, babe?" Megan asked, her tone light. "Nothing. I just need sleep," I muttered in defeat. The feeling receded. The disquieting unease left me. She smiled and gave me a peck on the cheek. "I'll leave you alone tonight so you can rest up. Maybe tomorrow will be better." I could only nod. It felt as if my blood had been drained from my body. Surely, I looked hollow or my skin void of color, but her reaction remained cheerful and flirty. She turned away, set the phone alarm for the morning, and nestled into the covers. I did not sleep. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling. Time passed in a haze, the seconds blending into minutes, minutes stretching into infinity. My eyes adjusted to the dim light, filtering through the thin curtains, and I began to notice the minute details of the ceiling above me. Tiny cracks splintered across the plaster, the paint already beginning to peel from its fresh coat, revealing faint water stains and the occasional cobweb as a finishing flourish. I could make out the slight variations in texture where the roller marks overlapped during the last haphazard paint job. My mind fixated on these imperfections, a desperate attempt to anchor myself in the mundane. Yet, the oppressive feeling lingered, a weight on my chest. It wasn't as strong as before, but its presence was undeniable. The sense of absoluteness gnawed at me from the left, a silent reminder of whatever unseen horror lay just out of sight. Every instinct bowled over, urging me to keep my gaze forward, to not turn my head even the slightest bit. The thought of what might be there, lurking in the shadows, was too much to bear. My body remained rigid, my breath shallow and controlled, as if any sudden movement or noise might draw its attention. Megan's soft snores provided a fragile comfort. I wanted to wake her, to share the burden, but the words wouldn't come. I was trapped, a prisoner to this unseen menace. As the hours dragged on, sleep eluded me. The darkness outside deepened, the walls pressing in as if to crush the very air from my lungs. I clung to the small details of the ceiling, using them as a lifeline to stave off the encroaching fear, knowing that dawn was still hours away. I couldn't bear another moment of this. Slowly, I lifted myself from the bed and made my way to the door, keeping my head still. Hunger had set in. I moved silently, cautiously crossing the cold car park to the glow of the vending machine. Inside, a variety of snacks looked faded from the sun. I pulled out a note and fed it to the machine, the normality of the action distracting me from turning around. The machine accepted the note, and I pressed the combination, awaiting something to take my mind off the dark. The spool spurred to life as the slacks slid forward and then down. I bent down to retrieve it. That's when the chanting began. I turned slowly towards the sound, an uncomfortable twisting in my gut rising to my throat. Ahead, a gathering of people stood in a crescent shape inside the park by the motel, including the service worker and caretaker woman. They surrounded a small pile of random items, illuminated faintly by the park lights. Even from this distance, I could discern the silhouettes: a pair of glasses, a map, a wallet, and keys. The chant resonated through the still night, each syllable rolling off their tongues with a rhythm that felt both ancient and powerful. The words were guttural and melodic, filled with a haunting cadence that sent shivers down my spine. As the group circled, the mundane items laid out in a ritualistic precision. Their voices rose and fell in a foreign, almost otherworldly harmony. The air seemed to vibrate with each intonation, weaving an invisible web of dread around me. My heart pounded and my skin prickled as if the very air was charged with dark energy. Though I couldn't understand the words, the intent behind them was clear: summoning, binding, compelling. Fragments of the chant felt disturbingly familiar, echoing with the weight of forgotten rituals. Each phrase seemed to hold a hidden meaning, a dark promise
as if the chant itself was a living entity reaching out to ensnare any who dared listened. The figures began to turn. Despite being about 20 meters away, I unconsciously crossed the car park and stood by the street, now able to make out their faces as they surveyed me. Their wide smiles and mouths agape revealed what felt like too many teeth. The chant continued, their mouths twisting to form the sounds, yet their eyes betrayed terror. Pleading looks from all of them tore through me, screaming at me to leave now. But their welcoming bodies stretched wide, inviting me to cross the asphalt street. The clash of emotions, fear, menace and warmth, all fought one another to be the primary feeling. My mind almost acquiesced, the scratching ache of what was behind me pushing me forward. It beckoned to me to join them. My body protested and screamed. The dread built as it sensed my thoughts. To turn and walk, I would step into abject horror. Forward was the loving call of familiarity. With a great uncertain step, I turned my back on the gathering and walked back to our room. As I turned away from the gathering, my body protested violently. My heart sank. Breaths long and deep. Each step back towards the motel felt like wading through molasses. An invisible force clawed at me, pulling me back towards the chanting group. The ache in my chest intensified, as if something was trying to rip my soul from my body. My muscles tense and strained with every movement. The chant almost engulfed me, surrounding me in a maw of alien chants. The distance to my room seemed to stretch interminably, the dim lights of the motel flickering in and out of focus. Extremely bright in one moment and pitch black the next. Each step forward was a battle against an unseen force that grew stronger with every passing second. My mind reeled, assaulted by a barrage of whispered temptations and threats that made my skin crawl. I could feel the dark energy digging into me, its tendrils wrapping around my very essence, threatening to pull me apart. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead, and my vision blurred with the effort of resisting the pull. Every fiber of my being screamed in protest, urging me to turn back to the comfort of the gathering behind me. The door to our room was just ahead. My hand trembled as I reached out, fingers barely grazing the doorknob. I looked forward as I felt the door, but my consciousness felt miles away. Each touch of reality was such a distance, it bed-rackled my mind. With a Herculean effort, I twisted the knob and stumbled inside, collapsing against the door as it swung shut behind me. Everything was quiet. The room was dark. The sight of Megan lying asleep on the bed brought everything into focus. My heart pounded in my ears, but I was slowly coming back to its senses. I looked around the room. I was here. Everything was back in its place. I strained again to hear the outside. Nothing. I paused and hesitated to look over my shoulder. Nothing. I turned and cautiously looked over my left shoulder to the door. Nothing. I locked the door slowly, made my way to bed and crawled inside. I felt I wanted to say something to Megan or awaken her, but something held me back. The fear I felt before was distant, lingering in the back of my mind. The thought was different now. It was almost as though it would become real if I acknowledged what happened. I listened one more time, trying to make out any sound of what was outside. Nothing. I slid closer to Megan, wrapped tightly around her and chose to forget. Sleep was not too far behind. I woke in a sudden panic. Upright, I observed the surroundings. The nice calm blue of the room was brightened by the subtle sun through the blinds. Morning had arrived, and Megan walked out of the bathroom, brushing her teeth. "Sleep well?" she asked. I took a brief moment to stabilize myself and breathe deeply. "I think it's best we keep moving," I replied slowly. She smiled and made her way back into the bathroom. By the time she finished up, I had packed our bags and was walking out the door. "Why the rush?" she laughed. I didn't stop. I opened the door and noticed our vehicle where we had parked it. I loaded it up and was ready to leave. Megan climbed to the passenger side with a confused grin. I had started the car. "Why so sudden? I have to drop the key off, babe." I drove closer to the lobby. The shutters were still down. I pulled the handbrake and took the key from her hand. "I'll drop him off. 2 moments." I got out and hurried to the chute. Glancing around, the park seemed normal in the light, but the ominous feeling lingered in the air. Keys deposited, I rushed to the car and slammed the door shut, locking the doors for good measure. Megan rolled her eyes and sighed. With glances in the mirror and a careful foot, I made my way towards the highway and the open road. I kept checking. Every minute or so, I surveyed the town as we traveled. We were up pretty early for the cozy little town, which seemed deserted. It was not long until we had left the confines of Graysore and were back out through the woods. "You going to tell me what that was about?" Megan asked. I looked at her and feigned a nonchalant smile. "Cozy little hideaway towns are not my thing. I'm keen for the big smoke, as they say." "So you didn't sleep?" I didn't know why I didn't tell her. Part of me wanted to keep the truth as a lie. I wanted to keep her safe from whatever that was. I sighed as I relented and opened up about my thoughts. "Alright, so..." Another part of me screamed in terror as a rising feeling tingled my neck. I stopped myself again. A glance in the rear-view mirror, and I could sense it again. It was behind me in the back, but all I could do was see the back window and the suitcases lying on the seats. It was still here. I couldn't look again. I looked away from the mirror and straight ahead. Yeah, average sleep," I hesitantly stated. "Are you okay?" I paused and nodded. Megan seemed to have accepted that answer and went back to idling. I wanted to say more. I was screaming in my mind, but it stopped me. The tension in the car was palpable, my mind racing with the events of the night before and what lingers behind us. Megan leaned back in her seat, quietly scrolling through her phone. I tried to focus on the road ahead, but the unease of the pit in my stomach wouldn't let up. Minutes passed, and the silence between us grew heavier. The winding road seemed to stretch endlessly, the trees blurring into a monotonous green. Suddenly, a faint flash of red and blue lights appeared in the distance, reflecting off the rearview mirror. My pulse quickened, but I kept my eyes fixed straight ahead, refusing to look back. Megan shifted in her seat, noticing the lights as well. "Are those?" She trailed off, her voice tinged with concern. I swallowed hard, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "Probably just a routine check," I muttered, trying to keep my voice steadied. The lights grew brighter, closer, casting an eerie glow inside of the car. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, each beat echoing the dread I felt deep inside. The urge to glance in the mirror was overwhelming, but I fought it, knowing that looking back might reveal more than just a police car. The siren blipped, a short, sharp burst that made me flinch. Megan turned to me, her eyes wide with worry. "What should we do?" "Just stay calm," I replied. Though my own nerves were fraying. "I'll pull over." I eased the car to the side of the road, the lights now glaring in full force through the back window. My hands shook as I shifted the car into park and rolled down the window. The officer approached, his silhouette framed by the flashing lights. Megan's fingers brushed against my arm, a silent gesture of support. "Good morning," the officer said, his tone neutral but firm. "License and registration, please." "Of course, sir." I pulled out my license and the relevant paperwork from the glove compartment. I handed them over as he began to scrutinize. His mirrored glasses glared at me, forcing me to look away. "You know why I pulled you over, sir?" No, I do not." "Your tail light is out." "Oh, it's a rental. It was definitely good when we left New York." "Yeah, I can see that." A pause. I looked up as he continued to read the papers. His face was stern and aged, poring over each of the documents I handed him. "Did you notice anything last night in town?" I gripped the wheel in surprise. The itch and clawing returned, digging into my spine. Like what, sir?" He looked at me. I felt my head move with strain to look at him. Something invisible, a dark presence, was gripping my head. "Did you notice anything at all, sir? No noises, no strange occurrences?" Another grip on my arm, this one from Megan. There was concern in her touch. I could feel her eyes on me, sensing something was wrong. No, nothing at all. Slept like a baby." The pause dragged on for too long. Each second felt like an eternity as the presence tightened its hold, sending waves of terror through my body. "So, you're a foreigner driving through this state in a car with a broken taillight that you hired from another state?" He sighed audibly. "Too much paperwork." He handed me the papers, which I gladly took, but they didn't move. He was gripping them tight as I tugged at them. "You got anything to say to me, sir?" There was a menacing threat in the tone of his voice. I glanced down and saw he was gripping his pistol, still in the holster. My neck suddenly craned upward as an unseen force began controlling my movements. My entire body was on fire from fear. My muscles ached as the invisible claws dug deeper into my shoulders. My eyes shook from the pain as my cheeks tightened, pulling up further and further apart with a smile too large for my own face. "Have a great day, sir." The policeman smiled wildly back, almost in wicked greeting. His hand left his gun as his smile grew wider to match my own. "And you have a great day too, sir."